We saw it during the crisis in 2020 when people could not evict tenants. It got absolutely skewed the other way. And some people like fire sold some properties because they're like, this person isn't paying rent and I can't pay my mortgage. So the question is this: how do most agents find the secrets to succeed in today's competitive real estate market, especially when the top agents are keeping those secrets to themselves? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. Hi, I'm Aaron Amuchastegui, and welcome to Real Estate Rockstars.
Hey, Real Estate Rockstars. This is Kelly Skeval, guest host with Aaron for the State of the Market today.
Yeah. Hello, Real Estate Rockstars. Kelly, thanks for coming back again.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited, as always.
As always, Kelly and I were hanging out in Nashville just the last couple of days. We were at a fundraiser out there that's near and dear to my heart. And it was fun. We got to, we had some other real estate people out there. Brandon Turner was out there with us. Yeah. Parker Touchton was out there with us. We got to talk real estate and fun stuff and see Nashville. It was only my second time to Nashville. Have you been there many times before?
That was my second time. So much fun. I love it there. It's my favorite city so far that I've visited.
You guys were staying in an Airbnb, right? But the Airbnb is downtown. I remember Nashville over the last several years. Last time I was there, I stayed in an Airbnb that was a friend of mine. But at that time, they were getting fined once a day, every day for having short-term rentals because Nashville was kind of anti-short-term rental for a while.
Yeah.
And tell us about the one where you guys stayed at, because it's not your normal short-term rental, right?
Yeah. It's not like a little house or a little condo. It was right off the street. I forget what this, it was right around the corner. It's right off of Broadway. And I could mess this up because Matt was the one that explained it to me, but it's like a bunch of little apartments that were built. And I think Airbnb got some variance and actually built a building and then sold the units off to individual people. So it's zoned as an Airbnb. And we stayed there last time. So we were in Nashville almost a year ago and we stayed there last time and loved it. It was newer then. It's really reasonable. The rates are reasonable. Like it's really nice in there. But yeah, it was interesting. And I actually was trying to last night, Google real fast, like what the latest regulations are there. And I couldn't really find anything since like it was either 2019 or 2020. Like there weren't really a lot of updates on what was going on down there.
Yeah. I wonder too, I'm going to do a little a little search to see what I can figure out. It would make sense for them to so the arguments against Airbnb are usually there's too many people living next door to me. There's parties late night. I wanted to live in a nice, normal neighborhood. And now people are coming out here for bachelor parties and bachelorette parties.
Yeah. And
there's no way to park. So I could see them actually, like the one where you stayed at, it's almost like a hotel. It was right a block away from our hotel. And I could see most of the arguments against Airbnb. If you've got a whole building that's like, these are individually owned, but all of them are kind of that Airbnb hotel style. Maybe it's because they made sure there was a certain amount of parking or something. I could see that being the option. Yeah. Right now it says you can get in Nashville, it's a short-term rental property permit information. The law requires anyone wishing to rent a property on short-term rental websites such as Airbnb must receive a permit from Metro Codes Department. It says there are two types, owner-occupied and non-owner-occupied. And new non-owner-occupied STRP permits, oftentimes investor-owned, are only permitted in certain non-residentially zoned areas.
That would make sense.
The land use. So that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Right? So maybe it is still illegal out in those residential parts, but where you guys were, it's down in this kind of heavy commercial area and said, in non-residentially zoned areas. And it shows the district land use table, new permit requirements and steps, rules. Once permitted, you have certain rules or you may lose your permit. They pay extra taxes. They must renew their permit every year. So maybe Nashville kind of solved their issue. My friend ended up selling his properties out there because I think it had gone up enough. But when they were running Airbnbs, it was very profitable for them. But it was also before the housing market like really started taking off. In 2018 and 2019, if you owned something then, I mean, last year it would have been worth a lot more.
Yeah.
See them say, all right, now it's time to get rid of it. So what, So you're in North New York, right? Like what's the market doing up there right now?
Upstate New York. So we've slowed down a little bit, going into December. But I was looking up the stats right before we got on, and we're still at a list to sale price percentage of like 101%. Days on market still like around 13, 1.6 month supply. Like it's still a seller's market, and houses that are well priced are still moving.
Yeah.
Quickly.
All of the stats in like Travis County and Austin are the same. We're seeing months of inventory going up slightly, but it's still like at 1.5 months of inventory. And compared to where people are like, man, it feels so much slower. We've been talking about this for the last couple months. And then when we were in Nashville, I was telling you a lot about the feeling a year ago. And I think right now people should be thinking about that. Like in your local market, think back to about a year ago in December 2020, in December 2020, or like January 2021, it was feeling a lot like this. It was a little slower. We had just had like a year of these kind of record sales, or essentially 9 months of these record sales. And people were starting to feel like, hey, will the market keep going or not? And we started buying a lot of stuff January 2021. And when we were buying it, people thought we were totally overpaying still. And so I think even though it's feeling like a slowdown, if I had to predict, where we'll be sitting a year from now, I would say we're going to still see some strong growth this year. You can't argue with a month and a half of inventory. Yeah. People can still get loans. Yeah. You guys have any appraisal issues up there?
Oh my gosh. So I've run into a few where like houses haven't appraised, and people, when they were a lot of buyers, when they were writing their offers, were putting in that appraisal gap quite a lot. I only personally with my clients only had a couple on both sides where they didn't appraise. That caught up pretty quickly. What we're really having issues with is there aren't enough appraisers out here. So appraisals are holding up our deals. It takes us 60 to 75 days to close on a normal smooth transaction. And we're not getting the appraisal reports back right away, and the surveyor. So we have to resurvey. I know it's different in different markets, but we also have to redo surveys every time there's a property sells. And those surveys are moving super slow, almost slower than appraisals. So yeah, it'll take 2 to 4 weeks to get an appraisal back, 4 to 6 weeks to get this survey done. Wow. I'm not even talking about the banks. Yeah.
Surveys here take a long time. You don't have to do it every time though. You can use one from when you bought the property if you still have it. So if they have it, you're able to reuse those. But if you don't have one, or if you bought it at foreclosure, or like any sort of low cost deal where the seller didn't have one, it's a $400 or $500 expense. And you do have to, as soon as you buy the property, kind of order one and have it ready, because, cash buyers don't need them. And so sometimes people are like, well, I'll save the $500 or $600 in case I get a buyer. But then if you get a regular buyer, there's no way you're closing on time if you don't have that survey. I had a really interesting appraisal story. It happened last night. It was a deal that I talked to you about back in January. I bought these 2 townhomes right next to each other for $179,000 a piece. They were new construction. We kept getting delays. I closed on them a month ago. So I closed on them back in November for $179,000, 2 side by side. I just decided to relist them on the market. I relisted them both at $219.
Nice.
That's a big change, right? That's a 25% or 20 something percent. Got offers on both of them. So $219, full price offers, conventional, no credits back, really strong offers. And then the first appraisal just came in at $214. Oh. So little disappointing, right? Disappointing because that's $6,000. And if I say yes to it, that means the one next door is also going to appraise for $214, because now it'll have an exact same plan.
Right.
Comp next door. So I'm having to weigh kind of these other things. So in one sense, I'm thinking I had multiple buyers, multiple offers at $219. It should have appraised. At the same time, the appraiser did see that I closed on it for $179, less than a month ago. Mm-hmm. And so them giving me $214, it's like a win and a loss. The win is they still gave me a 20% increase on the value. The downside is I really wanted that 22% increase. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet, but that's definitely some appraisal issues like that, where it is the appraisals aren't quite catching up with what people are willing to pay.
Do you guys have success when you push back on the appraisers, when you kind of like up here, we don't have a lot of success if we go back and provide proof and market analysis of other properties,
I've tried a few times, especially on ones where they were like really, really big issues, right? Like we've had some where it appraised like 40 or 50,000 low. And when we had the evidence, but even when you've got the evidence, they seem to just stick with their guns.
Yeah.
And I think they kind of have to, based on if you end up sending a comp where they actually change it, then they're admitting that the first time they didn't do a good enough job.
Yeah.
So you'd have to find people don't like saying, hey, I made a mistake. Like in one sense, people would like ones that are reasonable and want to look at extra things. But yeah, so I think the appraisals not catching up is still a sign of an appreciating market. When the market's going up or it's about to boom, that's a common thing. A lot of people are willing to pay more, but you've got to hold out. If I could hold out for one cash buyer, then my other one will appraise. So now I'm going to have to decide what I'm going to do with that. And, it's always tough to say. It's like bird in the hand. So I messaged back and said, okay, if they can't come up anymore, like how soon will we close? So is it a matter of I'll get paid tomorrow, but it'll be $6,000 less than I was hoping, or will it, or I can wait a month and try to get a better offer. We'll see.
Yeah.
Real Estate Rockstars, this is Aaron and Muchastegi for a quick commercial break. So during 2020 and 2021, the real estate market completely changed. There's so much competition in the market, so many people trying to buy and sell houses, but there's hardly any supply, hardly any product, hardly anyone willing to list their homes. It's time for every agent out there to become a hybrid agent investor, to be able to reach out directly to homeowners to try to get them to sell or list their house. We've got a new website. Go to leadpropeller.com and you can set up your own investor buyer website in just minutes. You'll set up your own URL, set up phone numbers, help go through to leads, help reach out to people that aren't listing their property currently, and have them fill out a form that says, hey, I want to sell my house. And then as an agent, you can go through and make them a hybrid offer. You can tell them, hey, I think your house would sell for $220,000 on MLS, but I can either write you a $180,000 cash offer right now, or I can help you fix it up and you'll list it for $220,000 on MLS. These are buyers that are looking for quick cash offers. Tens of thousands are submitting these forms every single day, and they're skipping the listing process. But so many of you guys out there are such good agents. It's a great opportunity to get that lead and help them maximize sales price for their home. So again, go to leadpropeller.com and think about signing up for your own investor site, so buyers will start reaching out to you, asking you to make an offer on their home. Let's see some of these articles you sent over. You've got, which one do you want to talk about first? You sent me some. I'll share my screen for those that are watching us on YouTube to see.
Do you want to stick with, so I did send over one about short-term rental. So they're two of the articles are two of the topics are very local to my area.
Yeah.
You want to talk about the short-term rental?
Sure. The town of Ithaca aims to limit short-term rentals with legislation. Yeah.
Yeah. So this one, it says the town of Ithaca is working, Ithaca. So I'm located in Ithaca, New York. And we have the city of Ithaca, and then we have the town, right? So it says the town of Ithaca is working on legislation to address complaints stemming from short-term rental properties. So as of right now, there's not any regulation on the short-term rental market up here. But we're a very transient area because we have two colleges. And we're also like a heavy tourist area because we have a lake and wineries. And so short-term rentals, on the lake are big. And then you can even be out in the towns and do really well with short-term rentals because of, again, visiting in the summer and families coming to visit their college students. So I'm actually surprised it's taken this long for them to come up with something. But the article goes, as a way to address residents' complaints, we decided we needed to have short-term regulations. There are none right now.
Yeah.
So one of the first things they talk about is that you have to apply for a permit. Mm-hmm. And which I think that's fine, whatever. But I also opened up the whole the whole document.
Yeah.
And they're saying that you have to reapply for the permit every year. And before a permit is issued, the code enforcement has to go out and actually tour the property, which seems like a huge burden on code enforcement.
Yeah. I think it's a burden, and it probably costs extra money. In Santa Barbara, it used to be anytime you sold a house, court enforcement had to come out and make sure you didn't have any illegal modifications. And
really?
Yeah. And so if you had like if you had like an extra room converted, they would make you take it out before selling it. Like any transaction had to happen in the city of Santa Barbara. And we actually bought one that had a bedroom conversion in it, and they made the seller put it back. Well, then it's like a whole different deal, because then you're like, you wanted it with that bedroom or not. So, code enforcement, when they're at things, maybe that's kind of the idea, that they'll get some extra building permit money. One of the things they said on here is funny. It was kind of what I said about Nashville. Goodman said many of the complaints are about renters having loud parties, creating noise issues, causing parking problems, and not properly disposing of trash and litter. So I think everybody feels the same way about. I love staying in short-term rentals. I think everybody does. Nobody wants to have the party right next to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I don't disagree with, the complaints and having some regulations, right? Like, I think that's okay.
Yeah. It's like freedom on both sides. People want to be able to do what they want with their properties, and then other people want to be able to enjoy the properties they live in. Yeah.
And our tax rate is like 3 to 3.5% up here. So we like of the, market value. So we have a heavy tax burden, up here. So a lot of homeowners will use Airbnb to offset their taxes. Those are the ones that, are renting the house that they live in. Mm-hmm. But so they go on to say that they describe like they talk about unhosted versus hosted. So when they talk about the unhosted, it's non-owner occupied Airbnbs, the people that have bought them. They're only issuing 2 permits per person. So you can only have 2 Airbnbs, 2 permits at all time.
That's probably a bigger part of that news and regulation, right? Like, so my buddy bought a bunch of stuff in Nashville, right? Like he was trying to invest and trying to scale. And so I think they're really saying it's okay if people are trying to offset their taxes, if people are trying to make a little bit extra money on the house they're living in, that's okay if they pay for the permit. But we don't want businesses coming in to Ithaca saying, we're a short-term rental company and we've got a bunch of them.
Yeah. And then they go on even further to say, you can't, it's down through the article, but you can't, if you have two, so if you are whether you're hosted or unhosted, if you have 2 units, you can't rent the 2 units at the same time. So say you have a duplex and you rent them both, or you have like an ADU, you can't have both units rented, in a short-term rental lease at the same time.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's a big, that totally kills the duplex ideas. So if you own a house and you have an ADU on the back, you can rent it, do it that way. So some regulations they're going to try, and Ithaca going from no regulation to regulation. Do you think that'll affect any of the housing values anytime soon?
I don't know. We still, there's such a shortage, right? So if somebody's not in there competing to buy it as an Airbnb, somebody will buy it as their own primary residence. So I don't know that it'll affect the home prices, but certainly people looking to invest here, right, will get less investors, or people. I think
you could temporarily see some extra listings, right? You could see somebody has 5 or 6 and that's their plan, but maybe they'll, there's probably ways to get, permits for 5 or 6 by different people. Depends on how they really define the 2. Well, let's jump to another one. You've got another one that was, it says good cause eviction legislation falters temporarily and will be considered again in December. And so it says there's the front, it shows people outside saying they have a right to renew their leases. Landmark legislation that would significantly strengthen tenant rights locally by forcing landlords to provide certain justifications for evictions will have to wait at least another month for approval. I think a lot of these, when they talk about the just cause for evictions, some people are using like evictions and lease end as something similar, right? I recently told someone, hey, your lease expires in 2 months and we're not going to be renewing it. And they were very upset. They could not believe that they weren't going to have the option to stay. And they're like, and you're only giving us 2 months. And I'm thinking, I only need to give you 30 days. The fact that I'm giving you 2 months to let you know we're not renewing, like that's law and that's normal. And so I'd be curious if this is this for all evictions? It says good cause eviction bill, also known as the right to renew, is aimed at ensuring tenants do not get evicted without a landlord first obtaining an order from a city or a judge, installs protections against certain levels of rent hikes, and generally lays out in great detail the circumstances under which an eviction can be executed. Dude, rent hikes is, I am totally against government when they are trying to decide how much you can do. What do you think about that one? What do you know about that one?
Yeah, it's interesting. So New York State it's like no secret, right? That New York State is a tenant-friendly state, right? So like the laws usually favor the tenant. Like, for example, you're talking about you only need to give 30 days notice. You can 30 days is fine if their lease is under a year. If they've lived in the property for, I think it's a year, up to 18 months or 2 years, you have to give 60 days. And if it's been more than 2 years, you have to give a 90-day notice, non-renewal notice. So yeah, it's already, I feel like we're already strictly regulated here. They're saying that if there's not a good cause, right? So if they're not like breaking the law, then they should have the right to renew without the landlord's input.
Yeah. The quote says, I do believe that the bar for removing a tenant from their home should be high. It should not necessarily be an easy thing. As many people pointed out tonight, the relationship between landlord and the tenant is not an equal one. What we are seeing in Ithaca and across the nation is a housing crisis. The cost of housing and the cost of rental units is going multiple over people's income. It's incredibly destabilizing to the community as they go through it. It's funny because as you talk through that, and I can see the other side of it, if someone has lived somewhere for 3 years, that is their home and their plan was never leaving. So I guess I do see that side and giving them larger notice. It's like, you live there for 3 years. Hey, we're planning on selling, because they were making long-term. At that point, they had no reason to think they weren't leaving. But rental increases, the ability, housing values stay strong when a landlord has the ability to like end a lease if they want, to raise rents if they want, and anything that is going to limit the amount of rent people can charge or the amount or limit what they can do with their property. We saw it during the crisis in 2020 when people could not evict tenants. It got absolutely skewed the other way. And some people like fire sold some properties because they're like, this person isn't paying rent and I can't pay my mortgage anymore. So there's anytime it's an extreme one way or another. But yeah, if you get to a point where we saw something similar in some of the California counties, we talked about it 6 months ago, where as long as people pay their rent, you couldn't evict them ever.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was going to ask if you'd seen something like this in other cities or states.
Exception was if you moved so if you were going to move into it yourself. So if you were going to, you could give less notice, or you could still do the just cause if you were going to move back into the home. So it's kind of saying you have the freedom to own your home and live in it, but you don't have the freedom to fully have all the rights as an investor. If it's just an investment, you have less rights than if it's your home.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. So it was tabled at the last meeting. There's another meeting coming up. I think it's actually tonight. And they're going to discuss it, but it won't be voted on. Somebody from our Landlords Association had asked for like a committee to be put together to discuss this further and really dig into it and really put something together. And they said if a committee was considered, that they would not allow any landlords on it. So that idea actually got squashed right away too. That's
like a jury of your peers. Like they're like, no, or we want it to be all people that have one opinion on that committee. I said, when landlords would be renting to tenants and understand they would not have the option to terminate an contract or release. Yeah. Same comment in there at the end. They're saying it's going to be unreasonable, or it's going to lower prices, or there will be less. There's multiple sides of the housing crisis too, because not everybody can afford to buy a home and not everybody can qualify to buy a home. Mm-hmm. So one of the concepts is the idea that, well, it's a housing crisis. And if landlords own all the properties, then it's stopping other people from owning it. It's I think the listeners know I'm skewed on this issue. I'm biased. I am a landlord. I love being a landlord and having rights of a landlord. So there's probably a lot of stuff on the other side that I don't see all the way. Although I try to see both sides of the issue as we go through. And that's in Ithaca itself, not the state of New York, or is it the whole state?
No, this is the city of Ithaca. It's already been passed up in Albany in New York. So they already passed that through, but I guess they're waiting to see if this is even allowed. And the Attorney General hasn't really spoken up about it. I am probably mixing up some terms there, but yeah, so we don't even, So there's a lot to it. And I mean, like, I think that it comes from, so there's the Ithaca Tenants Union they're the ones that drafted this bill. And it comes from like a good space, right? Like just trying to protect people and take good care of people. Like it obviously comes from a good space, but it's interesting.
Hey, real estate rock stars. This is Aaron Buchestegi, and I'm interrupting myself to bring you this commercial break from one of our sponsors. And I know you guys would much rather listen to the content and not the ads and not the sponsors, but this is one that I'm actually super, super excited with. You know, so many of the realtors that we interview on the show, they talk about how much systems are important and how much follow-up is important. And I'm really, really excited about our new sponsor. There's somebody I've been looking at for a long time. And when they reached out to me, I said, yes, we have to be able to do this deal. So that sponsor is Follow Up Boss. You know, on an interview last week with agent Mark McGuire, I asked him what his favorite software and what his favorite system was. And he said it was Follow Up Boss. And then he went on for another 3 or 4 minutes to talk about why Follow Up Boss was the best CRM he uses. So there's a lot of superstars out there that use Follow Up Boss. Some of the stats they gave me: Robert Slack, 1.5 billion team in Florida, #1 in the US. He uses Follow Up Boss to get a 400% ROI on its massive paid lead spend. Deborah Beagle, co-owner of the Ashton Group in Nashville, uses Follow Up Boss to guarantee that agents who join her team get 2 homes under contract in the first 90 days. That's a big guarantee for new agents. Barry Jenkins of Your Friends in Real Estate uses Follow Up Boss to automate everything so his team can produce 200 million on 25-hour work weeks. All right, so here's an offer. You guys are going to get this special for being Real Estate Rockstars listeners. Now, I've used Follow Up Boss. We've actually used it in our non-real estate businesses as well because it's so good at being able to set timers, set automatic texting and emailing, and what do you know? Best name ever, Follow Up. So here's what we got. For Real Estate Rockstars listeners, you get a 30-day free trial. That's normally 14 days. So in order to get this, you go followupboss.com/rockstars. So again, followupboss.com, just like it sounds, /rockstars. Go there, get your 30-day free trial, and check it out. Especially if you aren't using any systems or any CRMs yet, this will be a great one for you to start with. All right, everybody, thanks again. Now back to our show. All right, next article you sent over, CBS News says the top 10 housing markets of 2022. Think Boise, not New York City. We've seen a lot of these articles near the end of the year. You know, different people research them and they show kind of different things going on. But it said like the top 4 or 5 on there. First one says Salt Lake City, Utah. They're predicting sales changes of 15%. Increase in sales and predicted price change increases of 8.5% over the next 12 months. Median home price there, $564,000. Boise, Idaho, median home price, $503,000. Spokane, Washington, price change going up 7.7%. Median price, $419,000. I'm a little surprised about Washington. They've had a lot of kind of anti-homeowner laws coming out this last year. Were there any on the list that you were surprised by?
No, I thought it was interesting, but I can't really say that I was surprised by any of them. I don't know I didn't really have any expectations. So, right. Like,
yeah, I'm surprised I don't see any Texas ones on here. I shared something on my social media chart maybe a week or 2 ago that had essentially the top 30 housing markets and predictions for the next year. It was from a different source. And one of those was saying San Antonio, Texas, they believe would see a 17% price increase over the next 12 months. So this article is a little bit more conservative than that. Their highest price change estimator is 8.5%. But as we run it out, it says Salt Lake City was number 1, Boise City number 2, Spokane Valley 3, Indianapolis, Indiana, Columbus, Ohio, Providence, Warwick, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Greenville, Anderson, Malden, South Carolina, Seattle, Tacoma, Washington. Again, I'm surprised by that one. Worcester, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and then Tampa, St. Petersburg, Clearwater, Florida. You know, Florida's had those booms. A lot of just kind of random places as they go through that analysis. But overall, it just said many big cities like New York City and Los Angeles are forecast to see price appreciation, but not to match the smaller cities. So if you were going to summarize that article with one, it would probably be those. They're saying it's not the cities that we're going to see the biggest changes on.
Yeah.
I recently saw an article that said Austin is going to become the most expensive real estate market outside of LA.
Wow.
in the next few months. And I'm feeling that here and I'm seeing that, but it's wild because the draw that brought me to Texas years ago was the price comparison compared to California, because like the median home price in the little town that I invest in north of Austin, when I moved out here, the median home price was $90,000.
Yeah.
Right. So that's awesome. And they were new construction. There was so much new stuff being built and the median home price is $90,000. And now we're seeing big price hikes. Parker, who was with us in Nashville, he said, God, do you remember the town that he said he was from? Oh, no,
I don't. I feel bad. No.
Oh, gosh. I was going to pull up his state, and now I'm going to have to find it and to see, remember where he's at. Cause he had said out there too, that they're having just this crazy growth, and a lot of, startups are moving up there, and they've thought the same thing, that they're going to start to see a lot of, it was Arkansas. I want to say Bentonville, Arkansas.
Familiar.
Yeah. So anyway, in Arkansas, some of the stats that they were showing was a lot of tech companies moving out there and starting to, say that they're pulling in, people were moving there instead of Texas. So we'll see where that market goes. And before the podcast, I'll make sure that I get that stat right on there. Hey, real estate rock stars. This is Aaron Muchastegi with a quick commercial break. Now, you've been listening, you've been waiting, and now the big RentRedi mystery can be revealed. RentRedi just launched rental property accounting for landlords. It's so new, I haven't even got a chance to check it out yet. Now you can easily connect your rental properties from RentRedi to an accounting software created specifically for landlords with RentRedi's newest partner, REI Hub. I've used a lot of payment processing systems in the past, and it's always been a challenge, even asking them to generate APIs so it can talk to our existing systems. And they're really, any software that collects payments doesn't make it very easily to do that. But now with RentRedi, you can automatically transfer properties and charges from your RentRedi profile. You can track your income and expenses with matching rules and payment templates to speed up your bookkeeping. View your profit and loss or cash flow by property or unit. Get your portfolio's balance sheet, schedulees, and more. Guys, we're so excited about this. And here's something even more exciting. As always, with Rockstars, you get a special opportunity. If you're not currently using RentRedi, you can sign up using our special code ROCKSTAR50 and get 50% off your RentRedi subscription. Once you set up your properties, you can add rental property accounting as a premium feature. If you're currently using RentRedi, go check out the new accounting features designed to save you time and money while you manage your business. And remember, it's RentRedi with an I at the end, RentRedi.com. Thanks for listening. Go check them out. What else we got? So I had an article, we've talked about it before, the DOJ to appear in court in appeal of pocket listing lawsuit against NAR. So this has been, there's a lot of lawsuits over the past year about pocket listings, whether they're legal, and different things that the Realtors Association started to do to say a pocket listing does not benefit the seller. Essentially, if you're going to properly represent your seller, you need to list it on the market, because that's your chance of getting the best sale for it. It says DOJ to appear in court in appeal of pocket listing lawsuit. The agency, which is currently investigating the trade association's clear cooperation policy, says defending its interest in the application of antitrust. In May 2020, PLS, formerly a private listing network for real estate agents, filed a federal lawsuit against NAR and the California regional MLS, Bright MLS, Midwest Real Estate Data over a policy designed to curb pocket listing. The suit alleged the defendants had violated the federal Sherman Antitrust Act for adopting the controversial clear cooperation policy, which requires listing brokers to submit a listing to their MLS within one business day of marketing a property to the public. So they could essentially email something out to somebody, but as soon as it became marketed as, hey, here's a house that we're selling, it had to be on MLS. And what that law really does is, if you are a licensed agent, you cannot also be a wholesaler, right? Because wholesalers will essentially like send out an email and go, hey, I got this one locked up. Will you sell it for this? And that law was saying it's illegal if you're an agent, if you're a realtor, you can't send out an email to sell something without it being on MLS. And it's been getting battled. The company that filed a suit against it, one of the guys that started it was one of the $1 million listing guys we'd had on the show. So if I look really quick, the private listing network, what do you think about kind of that law? Do you think it benefits Do you think private listings can benefit homeowners, or do you think that that the Realtor Association is right?
I mean, I guess it depends on the situation, right? I would say in general, I personally feel like it doesn't benefit the seller, that putting it out on the MLS, getting the most attention will get you your best offer, right? But certain situations are like sellers don't want it being marketed. They don't want signs in the yard. They want it kept a little quieter. So I don't know. I guess it's based on each situation.
Yeah, one of the guys that started, James Harris. So he's from $1 Million Listing, and we've had him on. We interviewed him on the podcast before, and so yeah, these guys had set up the network for a way that they could essentially be able to pocket list a whole bunch of properties, all different levels, and it was kind of, if you sign up for this special network, you would get access to these ahead of time. So it was kind of in between being a wholesaler and the MLS. It was like an exclusive thing to pay for to get access to it. So the MLS didn't like that. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. But this has been going now. I mean, I think it just said on there, May 2020. So I remember we first started talking about that. Yeah. I think pocket listings, I think it's true. I think pocket listings do not help the seller. It does not help them sell their property for top dollar, even if they don't want to go with the showings and things like that. Supply demand, the more people that know about your property and the price, the better chance you're going to sell it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I actually agree. By Realtor.com didn't have to legally make it a policy, right? But they wanted to make a statement that said, we want to make sure that we're representing sellers the best possible way. If you're a realtor, you're representing your seller the best way. And they decided that the best way was not doing a pocket listing. I think the only
a lot of pocket listings out here.
I think the only advantage of a pocket listing could be, if you had a house on the market for 9 months, right? If it's a really special sort of property, if it's on for 9 months because it was going to take a unique buyer. There's a $20 million property. There's only 2 or 3, buyers in the world in a certain area that want that property. Mm-hmm. And so if you put it on MLS and it stays on the market for 9 months, then everybody gets bad. It maybe gives the property bad juju, things like that.
Yeah.
That would be the case. If somebody like kind of wants to sell their house, and maybe they understand that by doing it a pocket listing, they're not going to sell it for top dollar, but there's pros and cons. But yeah, I agree with the realtor, with at least their concept of, they think that, they needed to make that a law in order to better support sellers that hire realtors. And when it first came out, they were being pretty vicious on like fining people for doing it. So as they found, I was thinking that it would lead to less wholesaling. I'm still getting way too many wholesale emails. So it hasn't changed it yet. What else we got? So did we talk about the Albany's groundbreaking eviction law draws fire from landlords? Is this the same?
Yeah, this is kind of related to that good cause eviction one that we looked at earlier, that they've actually implemented it in Albany.
And the tenants cannot be removed from their home without meeting one of the grounds for eviction. The law gives tenants a right to renewal lease and protects them from annual rent increases of more than 5%. That's huge. Like that 5% number. Our rents right now get raised at a minimum of 8% and then up to whatever fair market value is. And in some places, we've seen just these huge changes. And the best thing we can do when residents are like, hey, that's too big of a change, we can tell them, well, we own another house in that neighborhood that can match your price. Do you want to move over here instead?
Oh, I like that. That's a good idea.
So, and we try to encourage them with that. We tell them you can move from this house to another one. You won't have to resubmit your deposit. We'll even give you 2 weeks of overlap. Which we want to keep residents.
Right. Right. Good.
But if a property is rented for $400 below fair market rent, the other people you have to service are business partners and investors and things like that. So you've got just as there's an obligation for people in there, you have an obligation to any of your partners to be as successful with their money as you can.
Right.
So here was a thing I hadn't heard of, and it just came out in an article in Inman this week. It's a venture capital article about this company. It's been around for a little while, but it says HomeTap raises $60 million to bankroll the growth of its home equity business. And we've seen a lot of like cool kind of companies come around over the last year of, hey, buy this house. We'll make a cash offer for you. We'll actually own it and you can move into it while you sell your old house. So there's another company out there that would say that. They would say, hey, if you want to buy this other house and you have to sell your own house first. We'll buy the other one for you. You can move in. Now you can furnish your old house and sell it for top dollar, and then we'll sell it to you. And there's cool ways for people to be able to jump. This one, as I said, for homeowners considering tapping into their home equities, the options have typically involved taking out a new loan, such as a home equity line of credit. Under Home Tap's model, an investor essentially buys a share of the home's future value, providing cash upfront for the homeowner. When the home sells, the investor makes their money back. Homeowners can also settle with the investor without selling the property. So when accessing their equity, homeowners often use it to pay off high interest debt. But it's kind of like buying a share. So they would say, and they just raised $60 million, to kind of continue the growth. December 6th announced the funding raise, which will go toward adding new employees, rolling out products, and mortgage brokers. But they could essentially say, hey, Kelly, we're going to buy 20% of your house. Right. We're not going to put a home equity line on it. We're going to give you $60,000 right now. We're going to buy 20% of that. And so now when you go to sell it, we get the first 60 of it. And then any upside above X, they're going to share in the profit of like 20% of the profit. So they're investing alongside, but I think it's not based on people's credit or their income or things like that. It's specifically based on the house.
Okay. Yeah. Cause I'm thinking like what reason would a homeowner choose this over like a HELOC or a home equity loan? But
totally.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. If somebody has access to both, I think a HELOC is better. I think HELOC is absolutely better because then you have 100%. It's the same thing. Yeah. You have 100% control of your property. Plus you get 100% of the upside. And usually a HELOC is super affordable.
But this must be, what's this, faster? They don't do like credit checks. Like it's not really based off of your performance as a,
it doesn't say in here, but I think from reading through kind of their way, it's very fast funding they talk about. So I think it's probably similar to almost like hard money lending, right? Like hard money lenders can say, hey, we still need some stuff done, but we can fund this deal in 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
Whereas, a HELOC is not a quick process.
Interesting. I had not heard of this. That's very interesting.
First time I heard of it too. For the last year, there's been so much less talk about tech and like in 2019, we were talking about these MLS lawsuits all the time. We were talking about, tech companies and all these new ways to sell houses and all these new technologies. And over the last year, the whole conversation has been like, no, all you have to do is list a house on the market and we'll sell. You don't need any of these fancy tricks. Just sell your house. Just sell your house and make a cash offer over asking. And so I think this could be a sign of the market going a little bit closer to what people have been used to. If they've been, I don't want to say normal anymore, but like what it's been like, if you're going to average out the last 10 years of, we'll start to see some more creative tech companies coming into place because people do have a lot of equity. And so maybe you're like, hey, I've got a lot of equity, but I can't qualify for the HELOC. I don't want to sell my home yet, but I would like that money now. Or if they're thinking about selling their house in 6 months, maybe that's a really quick way.
That would make sense. Interesting.
Couple more quick articles on, I guess I only have one more quick article. The $1 million question: do $1 million Freddie Mac mortgages conflict with affordable housing mission? So Redwood Trust, which issues jumbo loans that are off limits to Fannie and Freddie, said in a new critique that costlier markets are better served by private lenders. Higher loan limits for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac unnecessarily expand the government-backed mortgage giants for footprints into markets better served by private lenders and detract from their mission of supporting housing affordabilities. According to one of the nation's biggest issuers of private label mortgage-backed securities, they issue jumbo loans, and they're saying at the new limits, Fannie and Freddie will be assuming risk on mortgage to home buyers with incomes well in excess of national median. So they're kind of saying, and they're a little biased, but they're saying Fannie and Freddie Mac should stay out of the jumbo business. They shouldn't raise limits up to $1 million because Fannie and Freddie is supposed to be for affordable housing. And they're saying if your loan is $1 million or more, you're not in an affordable income bracket. You're not in a low income bracket. You're not in the 80% category on some of those things. But also just as I read through some of that, I think that's a little bit biased because they're saying, hey, we can't compete with that either.
Yeah,
because the private mortgage. I don't have a great interest rate on my house. When I bought mine, it's funny. When I go to try to qualify, if you're self-employed like I am, I have no W-2 with anything. And it's always a little bit more challenging. Right. Yeah. And I go through that process where all right, at that time I owned a couple principal residences, this big house in Austin. I think my rate's like 5.25%.
Wow.
For a jumbo loan. Like that's a high interest rate compared to what was going on out there. But part of it is because I couldn't, in our price point for it, like I couldn't get a government backed loan. And so it had to be a smaller, it's like a local bank that's the lender on it. And
portfolio.
And the cool thing about them is they look more at the actual person. Right. Or the deal. They're like, okay, if these are your businesses and this is what you're doing, then that's fine. And so they do it, but they charge a little bit more. So I could see why banks and lenders that are at that like 5.25% mark or 5%, they're traditionally, 1% or 1.5% more than the government backed loans. I could see why they would want to say that, but that's a pretty biased article. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, it sounds pretty biased, but then again, like you said, if it's a government backed and it's supposed to, work with people who need an affordable loan. Like you said, $1 million is quite a high price point. Yeah.
It's jumping out of that mission for sure. How are your investments going?
Good. We have 2 under contract, 2, one's a BRRRR, one's like a BRRRR B&B. So hoping to close on those in January, February. And let's see, everything else is good. I think I told you, we had inherited a tenant that took us like a year we didn't even end up evicting her. She abandoned the apartment and we had to go through that whole process. I think I talked about that last time. So it feels good to be on the other side of that.
Now you're done. And so to go through like the BRRRR market where you're at. So how much are you going to pay for that one that you're in contract for right now? What are you going to do to it? How much is it going to rent for? How much is it going to be worth?
Yeah, this one is super interesting and a lot of fun. So this is one that we have negotiated a purchase price of $85,000. It probably needs like $20,000 to $30,000. Just needs a little love, like nothing crazy. And then the after repair value should be $225,000. It's got a lot of potential. Wow.
So you're buying for $85,000. You'll be like $115,000 all in, and then it'll be worth $225,000. And the whole concept of the BRRRR is after you've owned it for a certain amount of time, you get that appraisal based on $225,000. You cash out 100% of your money. What will it rent for, you think?
What we were thinking about, $1,500 to $1,800.
Yeah.
So it's in a really good area. It should continue to appreciate. It's going to be, we're going to hold it. We'll just cash out our money. Yeah. We're excited about it.
That will cover a loan. That'll cover $140,000 loan. Fine. And so you should be able to, how did you buy that one? How'd you find it?
So I think I think I mentioned this briefly when we saw each other the other day. I've had 2 people come to me and offer to give us funding for our projects now. So this is with private lending, and then we'll obviously cash out of that.
Yeah.
Refinance out of it. But yeah, a private lender came to me and said he wanted to start doing deals. And so did another one. So now they're competing against each other.
So more than once you've had a seller die in the middle of a transaction. I'm sure there are listeners out there. No, but it's like a crazy challenge to have to deal with. I think there's probably a lot of listeners that have never, when you said that, I'm like, what happens? I've never had that happen. What happens? My assumption is the deals just get canceled because it's going to take too many months to do anything else. Is that what happens, or what do people hope happen? Or what advice would you give to somebody if they have a listing and all of a sudden that happens? Like, because
they're very different situations. So the first one was the seller was alive, but she was obviously she was 104, and she had her granddaughter as her power of attorney. And, but she also had a daughter listed on the deed with her, but her granddaughter was running the show and she was just signing as her POA. And then, so after we got it listed, but hadn't accepted an offer yet, she passed away. And then it became, so then the granddaughter is completely out of the picture. She's not allowed to make any decisions, sign for anything, because now it's just the daughter's name on the deed. So she then took over control. We had to have her re-sign all of the papers. And that one was it was very sad, and it required a little bit of extra work, but overall pretty smooth. This other one, we are literally like a week from closing, and one of the sellers passed away. This one, again, the attorneys were able to handle. The wife was still alive. And so I don't know what went on behind the scenes with the attorneys, but they were able to keep the closing date. We're still moving forward with the closing. So that one really did not get delayed at all. There was a couple of days where we were trying to figure out what to do, but it got handled between the two attorneys and everything is rolling forward. So yeah.
Not bad. So I know some states have essentially when you deed a property, you can say like these two people own it as joint tenants in common. And I think in that one, if one party dies, the property automatically goes to who's left to keep control. And that's kind of the reason behind it. So it doesn't stop control of it, knowing that people's trusts and people's wills can still deal with, the money that's owed and things like that. But I think that joint tenant in common idea. So laws will be different everywhere on how to do that and trust. But I think spouses are different than joint tenants are different than if there's only one seller and that seller dies, like you're definitely starting over. Yeah.
That's on that first one. I think if the daughter had not also been on the deed, then we would have had to stop. It probably would have had to go into what's that? There's a term where probate. It would have had to go into probate, and that up here takes like 6 to 9 months. So yeah, that would have been a totally different story. But
when you first said it, I was thinking probate and attorneys and like how can you save it? But now it makes more sense. Well, cool. Yeah. So we're rounding out our hour here for the state of the market for this week. Any last thoughts you want to mention for the end of the year, or thoughts about the real estate market in general, or things you're excited about?
Yeah, I'm excited. So last year, 2021 was like December 2020 was like, we slowed down a little bit. I'm not kidding. January 2nd, we were off and running again. At least my business was, and I had clients reaching out. So I'm crossing my fingers for another year like that. But
I think if I was going to make a bold prediction right now, as it slows down, I would say that in January, again, if you're a long-term investor, I think you should start trying to buy properties in January, because I think people will have a couple months of takes a little bit longer right now for stuff to get sold. People might be a little bit more willing to sell those deals. And I think in most cases, if you buy a house in January, it's going to be worth more when we're sitting here doing this podcast a year from now. So, as always, if we're buying houses to live in, you just find the one that you can afford forever, that you love, and you stay there. But if you're an investor or people are wondering what's going to happen with the housing market, I think that everything is pointing to it's still going another year. And if you're struggling in your own market, just think back to what it felt like a year ago. Talk to people, look at those emails from back then, look at the news from back then. And if it feels last year a lot like it did now, then maybe that's a tune of what's to come. So Kelly, thanks for joining me on the State of the Market this week.
Thanks for having me, Aaron. I always love it.
Thanks for bringing some great articles too. And I'm sure we'll have you on again soon as we get to talk about the real estate news. I love getting your perspective, and Real Estate Rockstars. Thanks for listening. All right, Real Estate Rockstars. This is Aaron Muchastegui jumping in again to thank you for listening to the show. Hopefully you guys loved listening to that one. And I want to make sure that you know about all of the extra resources that we have. And also, we need your help. They say podcasts are free. You get to listen to podcasts for free. But what is the cost of that podcast? I would say if I could beg you to pay anything for that podcast, I would say the cost of the podcast is going and giving a review. So whether you download it on Google or Apple or YouTube or anywhere else, please go give us a review. Say what you liked, what you didn't like. It helps us get better guests. The more reviews, the higher we get in the rankings. Right now, we are the biggest podcast out there for real estate agents, and we want to keep that spot because we know there's lots of podcasts out there. So go give us a review. Also, be sure to go to hibandigital.com. If you liked any of the resources that those real estate agents talked about, we've got a huge video vault of those resources for free. Every penny that comes on the podcast that we interview, they give us something that helps them get their deals or helps them work with their clients. And we put that in the toolbox in our vault for you. So go to hibandigital.com and you can get it. If you're looking for real estate education, go to rebusuniversity.com. We have all sorts of courses in there to help agents succeed in real estate, how to get the listing, how to negotiate deals, how to become an investor, all sorts of different stuff, rebusuniversity.com. And if you want to chat with me, go find me on Instagram. And if you come find me on Instagram, you can send me messages. Tell me what you want to hear. Tell me what you liked, what you didn't like. We try to put a bunch of content out there too. You can find me in 2 different places. It's at rerockstars.com for our Real Estate Rockstars page, or at aaronandmuchastegui.com for my personal Instagram page, where I can chat with you about all sorts of different things. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again soon.